Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Whenever we talk of vocational education, typically there are a lot of questions around it. And maybe I will start my presentation with one question. Is vocational education essential? And the answer, of course, is yes. Because there's so many jobs that require vocational education and training. But is it desirable for the student community? And then the answer is no. And why is it no? Because they do not attach any aspirational value to the vocational education. And my colleagues here on this dais have already spoken about the stigma attached to vocational education. So vocational education, we just talked about it. Is it essential? Yes, it is. Is it desirable? No. But like Dilip was prompting me, our CEO Sanjeev Duggal, his son has taken up a course to be a chef. So that's one, I would say, a difference from the majority of the people who do not really want to send their wards for vocational program. And why is it that it's not aspirational? Why is it that people perceive it to be something below the degrees that people get in colleges? The whole reason is that there is no idol for people. There is no, I would say, a role model to follow. And therefore what happens is vocational does not get the kind of importance that it should. If we look at India, does India have talent? Lots. And many of our friends who watch television would be fully aware of the kind of talent that this country has. There are a lot of reality shows, whether you talk of India Talent Show, Drama Bars, Dance India, Saregama, and there are n number of them. And a whole lot of participants who come for these kind of talent shows. And why do they come? Because they want to follow their role model. Perhaps it is time for us also to reach out to the larger audience that watches television, 200 million homes, through some of these reality shows, which could be around the best plumber or the best Indian electrician or accountant and so on. But having asked this question and saying why people don't go for it, perhaps the answers are not readily available. But there's a lot of work being done at all levels. And more importantly, I would say there's a lot of initiative that the government has taken. If you look at the ecosystem of the vocational education, we have the employers, we have the students, we have the training institutes, we have the government. But not all of them are talking to each other. The requirements do not map or match with each other. And that's where the conflict starts, and that's where the synergy is not able to take it forward. So key challenges that we have to look in the vocational education, cultural issues, because traditionally vocational education is not, is treated as a poor cousin of the formal education, the degree that we are talking about, the perception about it, the absence of integration of vocational education, which has just been announced by the government, recognition of prior learning, which is again part of the MBQF announcements that's there. Of course, the programs are definitely not industry oriented, and lack of access of adequate infrastructure or the resources we need to train the people. So vocational education is a jigsaw puzzle, still falling in place, and perhaps it will take few more years before we have certain clarity or we achieve a certain level of maturity in our society. But we as an organization at Centum have done certain experiments with employability. And I would like to share here two such models which we have experimented with. The first one, if we look at, I'll just skip this and move on to the case studies. The first one I would like to talk more about. This is a project which is 5 years old. Here was a client of ours who wanted to get into the retail space, set up some 300 stores across the country in small towns, tier 2, the metros and so on. But setting up 300 stores meant getting a whole lot of skilled, right talent to man these stores. So they came to us and we tied up and set up the Academy of Retail, where free training was provided to all the candidates. They had a very unique kind of a workforce composition, or I would say they were attempting to create a very unique kind of a workforce composition. They said, let's look for people who are willing to work flexi or they are willing to work full-time. We are open to take either or. Look at the demographic of wherever we are opening the stores, because all the people who get recruited in the stores have to reside within 5 kilometers radius of that store. And link it to the nature of the store that we are coming up, which meant that if it had non-vegetarian, that have people who can man those departments and so on and so forth. So that was one aspect, the workforce composition. The next they said is, let's look at population and say 25% of people that we recruit could be school goers or dropouts. So we are not targeting graduates, we are not targeting MBAs, we are not looking at degrees. We are saying look at people who can fit the bill. So school goers, dropouts 25%, graduates some percentage, meat handlers, fishermen, fruit grocery sellers, housewives. The best was the housewives bit. Though it was just 5% to start off with, it gradually increased to a much higher percentage of 10 is what was the figure at the end of 5 years. And also look at retired people, ex-servicemen, who are physically fit to work, whether it's flexi for 4 hours a day or it's full-time. So this being the mandate, we arrived at a point where we said admissions open for all and qualification is not a criteria. So it was a huge experiment that we had. And the toughest part was to have a curriculum or have a learning methodology which helped this very diverse kind of an audience coming to us. The certification at the end meant that you get a job. So if you're certified, you get a job at the end of it. And the certification did not remain a piece of paper merely. So what we did is, we set up Academy of Retail, a model where we said there are hubs and there are spokes. So hubs were the permanent location where we continuously kept on following the process and identifying people who would fit into the roles that we were talking of. And spokes were these mobile academy or centers which were set up wherever the stores were coming up. So let's say a store was coming up in Karnal, then we would set up our academy there, and these academies would run typically for, let's say, 3 weeks to 3 months to 6 months till we filled up all the vacancies that were there. And this is how we were able to meet the requirements. We followed the 4S model, which was basically setting up the academy, sourcing, selection, and of course training the people. The methodology we followed here was no books, no papers and pen, no charts, but only learning through the walls. So that's how the methodology was. So we said learning from the walls. All the learning material would be put up on the wall, and the instructor or the trainer, skill instructor, would take the people through all the walls, and then the learning would happen through the methodology of seeing it first, then hearing it, and then acting it out. Because through the see, hear and act methodology, the skills were being imbibed and they were able to perform when it came to the interview stage. So if you look at key achievements, some of the highlights have been given here. The number of candidates that we sourced, the number of candidates who got trained, number who got placed within that retail organization. And the benefit to the organization was, so again Centum Learning partnered, we met the demands. So we set up 14 vocational training centers. Few of these were in the public-private partnership and few were in-store formats where we did the sourcing, we did the training, we did the placements not only within the cash and carry store but outside. These were the programs that we were conducting there. See Hear Act methodology was followed. Few of the key achievements, if we look at number of people trained, placed, not only inside but other locations, placements in these organizations,